podcast. Fuck you, everybody. And today we have the mighty... Actually, no, I won't speak on you. I think I'll let you speak for yourself. Introduce yourself as well as your pronouns and everything that comes after I am for you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Michael Moore. I'm a spoken word poet from the Waikato, and I also work as a creative developer. Ko taupiri te maunga, Waikato te awa, tainui te waka, Maniapoto te iwi. He, him. But I have had life experiences where I've bounced outside of that as well.
Beautiful.
I think that's the true nature. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nah, we're not gonna pass that. Jump into that.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Yeah.
Oh, right now.
Yeah, go hard.
So yeah, as a writer, I was working on a thing called the manuscripts, which was to help young boys move through a rite of passage that just doesn't exist in today's society. Rangatahi Māori, yeah, but also, a bunch of other walks of life in our community that are not represented or identified. And I was figuring out how to try to do that through spoken word poetry about raising the messages up of these young people and creating a platform for young men to kind of really share testimony and break the shell of the reality that exists around them. I often say that for our young men, you need to have a system of beliefs that's more powerful than the oppressive, crappy reality in which you live. Or else, without a system of beliefs that's deeper and more powerful than that, then what reality do you have but the one that's presented to you? And as a young man, I remember suffering under the reality in which I lived as an urbanised young Māori. So fast forward into 2019. So last year. Working on that project had kind of brought me to a place where I was like, I actually need to develop as a writer, and I need to deepen my roots as an Indigenous storyteller. Often, and still, I feel like a baby crawling around in the heart, looking at the, and I can only kind of make sense of some of the sounds that it's making, but I don't fully understand it in terms, and that's kind of how I see my understanding of Te Ao Māori. I'm still just a baby crawling around in the heart of Te Ao Māori, making sounds of what I see. So I travelled to Canada, Banff in Canada, for Indigenous Writers Residency. And on arrival, or maybe not on arrival, but when we had our first session together with the group, there was poets from all around the world. Tira Moana Rapley was there, a friend of mine, Marina Alafosio. And then
Big player house like names.
Yeah, absolutely, and just powerhouse woman, that schooled me up my time being there. And then I realized that it was a group of 12 of us, and that I was the only man in the group. So I realized I was in for a good hiding.
Yeah.
In terms of breaking my own shell. So I tried really hard to kind of open my heart to that. Actually, no, I didn't try hard. It just it happened to me. So we're sitting in this first session, and we had two of the Cree elders come in and do a session with us about life, really, And they got to this point where they were talking about how we identify as human beings. So gender for them was less about physical assignment and more about how the spirit moves. So they had all of these identifiable ways of being that they were starting to explain to us. And a crazy thing happened in that moment. So we're watching these two elders, an elder Cree man and an elder Cree woman. Jerry and Joanne Saddleback are their names. And I'm actually watching them move from masculine to feminine, and each of them would just play one role. So like the Jerry would get up and he would present as in this powerful feminine kind of embodiment, and then his wife would get up and she'd be completely masculine and just drive the messages home, And you'd miss it, if you weren't watching. You'd miss it if you weren't watching. But while they're talking, I just get this image of in my mind where, so Joanna's talking, right? But now she's like talking to me in my brain. But while she's talking to the group, and I just see her raise her finger up and she's like, come and sit next to me. But that's not happening in real life.
No, yeah.
This is happening in my mind. And so I walk across the room and sit next to her. And she holds up her finger and she says to me, if this is the meaning of life, my finger is the meaning of life or the purpose of life, and I'm a woman and you're a man, what do you see? And naturally, my natural inclination was to kind of try to look around the finger to get more perspective. And she's like, no, you're a man, fixed position. What do you see? And I said, oh, okay, well then I see this side of the finger, and then she said, cool, on this side, I see this side of the finger. And then to give me something identifiable, recognizable from the world that we live in, she started to say, well, what if I put an L here and a B here and a G here and a T here and a Q here and a 2 here, around this finger that represented the purpose of life. And she said, now what do you gain with all of these other recognizable, identifiable walks of life? And I said, more perspective about the purpose of life. And she said to me, yeah, while you're here, you'll spend the least amount of time that you've ever spent being a man.
Yeah.
Wait, so...
And so it was in that experience that I learned to bounce outside of all the things that I had accumulated in my life experience about being a man. And it was a completely freeing experience to move and gain more perspective about the purpose of life, but also about the plight of other walks of life. And you find this common struggle, you find this common thread between all people, and it's usually through that struggle, and the margins kind of light up, and you see that you're not the only one in there.
I feel like you literally, just carry on.
Yeah, so continuing on that story, I guess, and this is a little bit personal, but I met a woman there, a mother, who I just vibe was so hard. She was hilarious, she was nurturing, and I realized kind of in hindsight now that she was echoing so much of my mum back to me. And because I was so far away from home, I found it really hard to plug into my own tipuna and feel kind of safe and grounded, especially because I knew that this was such an unsettled space for me, and I was now lifted off the ground and getting smacked up. But, and we talked about it earlier, she could really hold space. And that term gets thrown around a lot, in kind of frivolous ways, but this was a person that could really do it. And we were playing a game, and where you had to it was a theatre sport game, where you had to kind of make the person respond to you negatively or say no to you. But, and I did really well at the game, like I was cheeky and, being a cheeky Māori. and I was really able to get kind of people to respond and say, oh, no. And then, they'd be out, next one comes in. But I got knocked out. And then she gets up and is playing the game, and she's just killing everybody, And it's almost like she had spent so much time being kind and nurturing to everybody that they just weren't ready. They weren't ready. And I was watching it happen, and the game finished, and we all went to the kind of sky deck for lunch, this beautiful sky deck that it just had incredible snow-covered mountain range on the outside of the window. Just incredible colours reflecting into that where we were having lunch. But on the way over to lunch, I said to her, man, a contrary would be really good at that game, me. And then she was like, what did you say? Then I was like, Contrary would be really good at that game. And then she just went quiet, and we kind of walked over to lunch really quiet. And as we were getting our meat and stuff from the buffet, she said to me, did I ever tell you that I was contrary? And I was like, nah, I don't think so. And she's like, yeah, I don't tell many people that.
Oh.
And and so she said, how did you know? And I said, I couldn't figure it out. It took me I went to my room that night, and I was like, man, why did I know that? I've only just recently been introduced to this term of contrary, which I'll break down in a bit. And then she was like, come to lunch with me the next day. And she said to me, you could see that I was a contrary because that's where you are now. So you're not really in the spirit of, your spirit's not moving as a man right now. Your spirit's kind of drifted over to contrary. So a contrary spirit is like two-spirited, well-balanced masculine and feminine. But the contrary spirit is interesting, one, in how it behaves, and two, in the way that if you have a best friend, right, that calls you out and hits you with the honesty and tells you, you're being a dick. That's what the contrary spirit does to yourself, So it's like your best friend that will give you the honest, hard truths, and the contrary spirit will do that to yourself. But the beauty in the way that it behaves is that it does that through the clown spirit. So when we think of Dave Chappelle, for example, who is a master of this thing, that's where he's going often, is that he actually gets the plight of the people that he's talking about, because I imagine that he's bounced outside of himself. And the time that he spent in, when he went back to Africa and spent time with the griots, the indigenous storytellers from in Africa, I feel like he probably went and developed that craft in a very similar way that I experienced in Canada, but obviously he's the macadamian at it. And so, it does it through clownish behavior. And what I mean is that comedy will allow you to pierce into subject matter that no other kind of way of speaking can go, And so, I recognized that, right? I recognized that when she was smashing everybody and getting them to say no, and she had this kind of walking this really clever knife's edge of comedy and too real. And so to bring that full circle, that's how I kind of bounced outside myself, and I was able to kind of see life from a new perspective, and in journeying to a contrary spirit and looking at life from that perspective, the taste and the taste for wanting to do more and go deeper and understand the plight of more people really started to kind of liven up. Yeah, and I, where I come from is poverty, relative poverty, but also kind of machoism, kind of upbringing. So to arrive at a point in my life where I'm having these experiences, and it was just last year, that to really break my own shell was incredible. And and then I realized one more thing. And then I realized, and this was a massive realization when it comes to the work that I was doing on the manuscripts. So in my mind, I thought, okay, my job in working with young men and getting them to express and use poetry as a tool to kind of break up the storms in their mind and get it down on paper. I thought that my job was to try to help develop good men. But I realized in walking away from that experience in Banff that actually some of these young boys won't even want to be men when they grow up. And I would have to recognize that and see that and support it and encourage it and advocate for that in my work coming home. Yeah.
I could almost cry listening to that, because I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard an adult say that. and I'm 28. Like the impact of that message, or the even like you're willing to go there and put yourself there so that you can open up and hold space for other people who actually don't know that they're in that space, or they operate in that space because their conditioning does not teach them at all about acceptance in that holistic like environment.
Totally.
Wow.
And you have to experience, in a way that is just completely sensory overload. And they talked about the 6 ears, the 2 ears of the mind, the 2 ears of the heart, and the 2 ears of the stomach. And when we're listening in that way, well, if your heart is on, your mind is on, and your stomach is on, well, that's already 2 more places where you can store that information in your body. And the mind is just processing anyway. But it'll sit in the heart, it'll sit in the stomach, and it'll dissolve and manifest in you with a little bit more oomph, with a little bit more power.
Kelsey wasn't ready.
It's like my mind has just been blowing. I'm like, oh my God. So how did that experience change the way that you support young people now in your mahi?
Yeah, I think the concept of truly identifying and advocating and representing and speaking for all the walks of life in our community became just paramount. Because there's so many walks of life and ways of being just here in Hamilton City that have no representation, no platform to speak, no environment to be. And imagine that for a second. That sucks. And then when you do try to go out and be yourself and do your thing, the weight of the narratives of society says no. Yeah. And that stuck with me in a heavy way because I was okay. I mean, I'm a Māori man, so we have our own struggles. Everybody has their struggles. But in a way, I played sport, I did the thing. I could have lived inside that paradigm quite happily, and just played my role as a athlete, as a brown male athlete. There's a place for me in that, but it's just not enough, eh? It's not enough to sort yourself out. And that's not the messages that are incoming from my tipuni every day. It's not the reason why my right ear hurts all the time, Yeah. That's not what they were about, Dare I say, we're all looking just for deeper or sharper ways to articulate how to bring love into the world.
That's it.
Yeah. And we went there so quickly. Sorry, guys. We're already there.
No, you're fine. I'm just like having a moment over here.
Yeah.
No, that's surely it.
And I can't get off that ride anymore, I'm just on it. Yeah.
When I was saying to you, how do you switch off, like outside, that's what I was meaning. Like I'm on that train and that train is so heavy and I feel like I can be shallow and pretend that it doesn't exist. But my heart and my ears and it's like my mind will not shut off that the love that I seek and the love that I want
Totally.
on the inside can help everybody.
Totally. Yep.
And I feel like I don't know how to actually I probably do. I just have been lazy to dive in deeper to actually understand and articulate what that means. But right now I'm just like I think I'm in war because I'm like my past told me this and my present is telling me this to move and shift. Yeah. And that's the part where I'm like, oh, and it so low hanging fruit. It's easy for me to look around and complain instead of look around and be like, actually, let me look around on the inside. Because I'm looking around on the outside, if I'm being frank. Like, I'm like, it's not happening on the outside, so it's the world's fault.
And then we let the outside or external forces move us to a place of inaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes my spirits.
And it hurts.
And it's like it's weird because every time I try to talk about this, the people that hear me think that I'm complaining about the oppression, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain it to you. I just get it, and I know what it feels like. I know what radical self-love is, and I don't know how to tell you that you can access that.
Totally.
Or everyone can access that.
Yeah.
Because when everyone's telling me like, oh, you must have had a shitty week or a shitty day, or like, and I'm like, I've never had a shitty day in my whole life. I've had shitty moments of the day, but for the 24 hours of the day, I'm like, what? And then like, you know, oh, you've got so much on your plate, and I'm like, that's the fun part. That's fun for me.
Yep.
So I keep on telling everyone now that I'm distracted. I'm not busy. I'm distracted with all the things that are helping me keep my conditioning lifestyle.
Nice. Yeah, and that term busy, eh? We've all got to move away from the term busy.
So much. And like you just have priorities and what you're going to put at the top of that list, or you're going to let be at the top of that list. And I find that a lot of people let that be work.
Yeah.
Like work is my priority, or like, sorry.
Go there.
Like all these things that society, white Western society tells us are important, and what those societies tell us to be proficient in is to be successful. And I'm like, actually, well, in my worldview anyway, mahi's just a vehicle to get me to something else, not with the destination.
Yep.
And I'm just like, fuck, I'm just there to pay my bills, mate. Like,
Totally, because we do live in this reality, so we still have to make it work here.
yeah.
You know, like I have to bring my dreams here to create them. So I've still got to understand that this is the duality reality. So I've got to find balance here, you know. I've got to try to make it work here. And that's that we were talking about it outside. So when you think about people like we were talking about Tupac, you know, I mean, he was there. He had sharpened his tool of expression, you know, of his message. Whether it was the gangster rap or the loving rap about his mother, there was always an undertone of, man, there's some heart in this stuff. There's some heart in this stuff. And sometimes it's not about, and we do this all the time, right? And I don't know why we do it to ourselves either, but we give ourselves measures and KPIs and outcomes.
That are time-based, and I'm like, time's actually the biggest enemy here, like longevity.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. Time is the best.
Boy, you go there. Tell us your whakaaro around time.
Well, it's, you know, it doesn't exist when the experience is magic. You know? And we build constraints of time around experience by loading up the outcomes before we've had the experience.
No, I'm loving it because I'm like, you literally are calling it out, because we create events, we tell them it's from 9 to 4, and we tell them they'll have fun from 9 to 4 only, which means that I'm like, we're already setting them up for expectations that are absolutely unreal. Because we don't know if like the experience or the sensory experience of that event.
Sensory, totally. And we are in the habit of conforming to measures that we don't like. And so we create the measures that we don't like around experiences that we want to be game-changing experiences.
Because it's been mimicked to us our whole entire existence, right? Oh, well, and if you live in a Western society.
Yeah, so we're constantly peeling back the layers to get to that message, you know? So I think, you know, the practice of a craft, the practice of articulating your message, however that is, whether it's as a advocate for creativity in the arts, you know, I feel like creativity will really get you there. It'll really help you to articulate your message, you know, to sharpen your tool, to and like I was saying earlier, you know, it comes back to that heart message, you know. And I talked about poetry being a place of testimony for me first.
And you mean testimony in a, like, what do you mean from like, what do you mean when you say testimony? Because the only other times I've heard testimony was from a religious perspective. So
yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, that's got some connotations, eh? I mean, just speaking your truth.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen the movie Couples Retreat?
Yeah.
You know, and he gets attacked by that little baby tiger shark. Vince Vaughn. And it was like a tiger shark. But to him, he was super afraid, and they were like, was just a little baby tiger shark. And he's like, I know my truth. I know my truth.
Yeah.
I was in danger. I know my truth. That was a bit of a tangent, but not really.
No, I feel like it works because
Yeah.
I don't know if it has happened for you,
Yep.
and I'm assuming here, but you can check me if it does. But when you start to see recipes of how life works from a different lens, every movie that I've watched and rewatched since I've been having this new way of looking at things,
Totally.
it's hidden right in plain sight.
And you can see the concept, right? You can see that, man, they must have really, because that is just the outcome, you know, and it's very imperfect to say the concept that they were probably sitting with when they were conceptualizing this movie. You know, when you think about The Matrix, I think, man, the Wachowski brothers, now Wachowski sisters, must have been so on, you know, like, because this is just one manifest of the thing that's beating away in their hearts, you know. And even for them to go from, you know, they both had sex changes from men to women. I mean, man, tell me about that, eh? Because after the experience I had in Banff, before the experience I had in Banff, that would have made a weird sense to me, you know, like I wouldn't be able to get it the way that I get it now, because that's just like, that's where they grew to, you know, and they preferred to sit in this perspective, or maybe they understood the way the world's working now and they moved into another position of power, you know, because, you know, the world is gonna the world is gonna turn, folks, you know, and I think in the best of ways, you know, and they just got ahead of the game. But because they're listening, you know, they've got all their ears on and they're listening to the resonance of the message, you know, and they've imagine what they got back after the fact, you know, of having the Matrix out in the world. You know, what they got back from the world after the fact of presenting this articulation of their heart to the world.
I recommend it to my students to watch it, because in my head I'm like, you need to understand from a different perspective what all this political game is, because like to me that is such a great, like when I think of that word, like that movie, the word that comes to my mind is emancipation. And like to me I'm like,
nice.
Everybody deserves emancipation. Like, and everybody, like I'm kind of moving towards the question of, like, you spoke about listening versus comprehending. What is your perspective on that?
Just right now in the moment, comprehending does that thing of, what does this mean? What is the outcome of the thing I'm hearing, listening to? What is the outcome, you know? But I think listening is just listening, you know, without starting to put a fence around it, without trying to comprehend it, just to listen, feel that, and let it inform you forevermore. You know, this is the trick of our kaumātua, eh? They will seed things in you that you will try to comprehend for the rest of your life. You know, but
Right, here you go. Good luck.
yeah. But the skill and the art of it was just to listen and to allow it to come and be a part of your life and to continue to inform you. And at some, you know, you might be lucky enough that someday the penny drops, and the penny might not drop in terms of comprehension, but maybe I see myself at 60 years old now passing that message on to, you know, my nieces and nephews, or, you know, grandkids on the marae, the way that it was passed on to me, and in that way perhaps it was fully comprehended.
Beautiful. I feel like, because I guess from my understanding, it's always just a struggle for people to listen in the conditioning. So I guess I have to be really specific around the conditioning. Like, it's hard for people to listen, firstly, and then to comprehend the message. It's like, you called it out. We're trying to box it into, like, the message has to mean something and there has to be an outcome out of it, or there has to be this or that, which I feel like, I'm so thankful that you actually said what you said, because it does shift for me, because I feel like there's a lot of conditioning thinking that I still have not unlearned.
Yeah, and it comes back to, our understanding of time as well. we want instant understanding or gratification or whatever we're listening to, we want it to give us something right away. But better to let it slow cook over the course of your life, I reckon. Particularly if it is where it's coming from, particularly, say, for example, if it was a kaumata or tohunga or, nah. It can actually come from anywhere. And I think that's even a better way to look at it.
Yeah.
Is that it can come from anywhere and anybody. We can get schooled and by any angle. And it kind of reminds me of just an idea that that's kind of pinging away in my head while we're talking, but of all the potential realities in the world, you may as well pick a good one, eh? And I think that's what when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to poetry and metaphor, I've excuse me, directly related that to metaphysical understanding, as if metaphor is how we articulate metaphysical. And man, I really enjoy that reality that I never had before. It brings so much magic into my life, and it allows me to really see and visualize my tupuna, speaking to me and being with me and giving me information. And then, on the flip side, so it puts me in the spectrum, like it puts me in the spectrum of life when I think that way. And then I know that part of my existence, if not all of it, is about having that filter through me, and being a kind of a mouthpiece or a system that hands that over to my kids and so on and so forth. And I think, in Te Ao Māori and Indigenous cultures, this is just the norm. But as we were talking about it outside, we think about that in terms of a straight line often. But actually that thing's coming full circle again and again and again. I think every time we're born and reborn, and our descendants are born and our kids are reborn, one cycle closes and another one opens, but they're all just looping into each other. Yeah. Much like the foundation of all life, the double helix.
It's beautiful and it's powerful, because I feel like everything that you've said has literally expanded my mind, challenged it, and at the same time helped me understand what your worldview is like as well, because I feel like your worldview is definitely not heard of and like in mainstream, and then how would you say
I can count the times that people look at me like, what is that guy on? What is he on? But,
and isn't that a good thing though?
Yeah, it is, because you in a way I feel like they were listening and listening in the context of what we're discussing, listening to be, and enjoy that whittle, enjoy that challenge, because I get it every day as well from people in my life, from my daughters, schooling me on how to be a dad. I mean, if you want to learn how to be a dad, let your children teach you, or share with you. Teach is another thing as well, teaching versus sharing. If we learn to share, it changes that whole dynamic.
Whole power dynamic. It changes the whole power dynamic. Like I'm on, like as a facilitator, I don't like to be that traditional mold of I know and you don't, and I'm filling an empty like a bank.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not me. That's not. I've never been like that, and I've always been in a process of you go to the expert in the village to learn from them, and then they go to someone else, and it's like everyone's got a different expertise, and it is like what you said, it's sharing. And also to go back to what you were saying before around everything's kind of cycled and it goes in and out through times. I've all like just this year I've been I've accepted that I'm an avatar of my ancestors.
That's cool.
And like I claim that, like I say I am an avatar of my ancestors, because I like to consider myself as a vehicle of their message. And at the same time, it's been challenging to try and think in that space, if I'm being honest, because knowing that process is one thing, but also trying to achieve or action in that mind state completely different approach. Like I'm currently failing through it. I don't know what it is that is right, but I'm also not giving myself like that doubt, because I feel like giving me that doubt is not going to achieve this whole thing. So I'm like, you know what? Let me fail through it. I've failed through everything else in my life. Like,
Yep.
but I don't consider failure as like, I'm like, failure's also teaching lessons. I'm like, oh snap, that did not work for me or other people that were involved. No. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. All of my big lessons in life have been from making mistakes. Bad ones, big ones, you know. And
Guilty.
Yeah, same.
and I love that.
Probably shouldn't have done that. Oh well, I learned something.
Yeah.
Next thing. Yeah.
And if I didn't learn it, well then it'll just happen again, eh?
Yeah.
Until
I finally do
so
learn.
you pick up the lesson, yeah. I love what you said about the avatar though. Because it's all divine and sacred incoming, you know, and it's like, well, I can't comprehend all of that, you know, but I can try. And then a part of me exists in this as well, you know, like all of this is incoming through my human experience. It's filtering through me, my reality here and now. So the value of me goes up. You know, the value of what I am and who I am and my experience as a human being goes up. And I don't look at my life at a lack. I mean, I often do, but in my better states, you know, I don't look at my life as a lack. Growing up, urbanized Māori, disconnected from te ao Māori, you might see that as a lack. You know, half caste, stuck in between two worlds, you know, and I can't quite fully manifest in kind of the way society is and in our kind of colonized European way of living either. So rocking a hard place, and I could see that as a lack as well. But there's so much beauty in walking that fine line, you know. And now that the world is looking for balance and flow and everything's hybrid and businesses are coming together looking at collaboration, and, you know, we don't want collaboration to be this tokenistic thing anymore, and we're really trying to make things happen. In terms of partnership and flowing together, well, who better to do that than somebody that's walked that fine line of balance their entire lives?
Right.
What better archetype is there in the world than me to do that, you know, than us to do that? Because that's all I've ever known.
So are you saying that your life was preparing you for these moments?
I think so.
This whole time?
I think so, yeah.
And every time?
Yeah. And I mean, it's always been that moment. I have, you know, I look at it in this way. So I think a few years ago I was working in an organisation where we were looking at fusing tikanga and policy. So we had the lawyers on one side and then we had our kaumātua and kuia on the other side. And bring these two things together, you know, te ao Māori, tikanga, kaupapa for kōrero Māori, and then policies and procedures and human HR stuff on this side. And the best we got was this kind of paralleling each other, you know. This world came here beside the other world, and nobody can see my hands. And they were just paralleling each other, but they were also highlighting the disconnect. You know, they were highlighting how these two things actually are not kind of working well together. And how do we bridge that? How do we fuse those things? How do we get them to turn and twist like the double helix and forge together as life and new fusion, you know?
Go be it.
From the double helix to the nucleus to the cell to the organ to the body. Yeah.
I love that.
Science. No. But how do we do that, you know? Like, how do we get these two worlds to come together? And so he brought me into the mix. The kaumātua brought me into the mix. And I can't help but feel it's because he knew that, you know? He knew that around post-1985, these are dual world walkers, you know? And we need somebody who understands what this fine line might look like. Because it's not a bridge, is it? It's not one sphere here of te ao Māori. It's not one sphere here of society and the things we live in right now, and then this bridge in between. Because then I'm a temporary thing, you know? And I'm not even a thing. I'm just bridging these two worlds. That's not right. Actually, it's a sphere and a reality of its own, you know, that is in between. And so I get, what I'm saying is that my experience that may be viewed as a lack of both of these worlds is actually a full and complete, valuable, essential sphere of life and all the realities and spheres of life that we exist.
Mm.
You need it. We need it, And when we think about Treaty of Waitangi, when we think about duality and the way it works in Aotearoa, it could be better.
100%.
It could be so much better.
Mm.
And we know that. We were born into it. And so, again, working with young people, I think they have so much to share with us around that. They have so much to share with us around how it actually works and how it can work and how we can how we can really achieve that fusion, and kind of in the country and the world that we live in today.
Mm. On the opposite end of that, do you reckon that because we haven't been able to, like as a society, we haven't been able to fix, something like the treaty? We haven't been able to not bridge it, but we haven't been able to really encompass what that connection looks like. It's manifested and it's like that as a ugly like entity, or that as an entity, educational or not. So I wouldn't say it's ugly, but that as an entity has manifested itself to like different little things where it's kind of like going back to our kōrero before. If you don't learn it one time, it manifests into other different things, and it might take 1 year, 100 years, but it's still going through that. So do you reckon that as a cycle, like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have to come back to it because I feel like the original intention has been toxified and reiterated in its toxic state again and again and again and again. We have not been able to use it as the foundation in the way that it was intended. And we've arrived at a point now where inequity is everywhere. And I was hearing it in that little kind of spiel about this podcast, And so now we're challenging that. Now we're trying to walk that thin line, And in Māori, there's a whakatauki ka mua ka muri, go backwards into the future. And so history needs to be present still in all of the things that we're trying to achieve. There's no innovation here. There's no new thing. It's just re-innovation of something old to fit the environment in which we live. Because the world has changed. It's a new environment. But we need to.
And what does ideal support in that space look like moving forward? Because you've talked about needing to bring the past back to us. So is it maybe educating about the past and the things that worked or didn't work? Or like what does ideal support look like moving forward from here?
Experience. I think we need to come back to free reign experience and allowing that to fail as it does in life, because where were our greatest lessons learnt, and allowing the experience to just grow and be and manifest and inform how we go forward. Until such a point that we can kind of look back on it and review that experience now. Like we let it run its course. But there's kind of, I say to my daughters all the time, the only laws and rules I don't want you to break are the laws of nature.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. And
Love that.
That will teach you, then you'll know. And so we have to come back to that in a way as well, like strip away all the stuff, and really either. Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting in this philosophical soup at the moment around. Sorry, what was the question exactly again?
Like so moving forward into the space of like collaboration and this connection between like tikanga and policy maybe, and how can we make that less of a dualism of like tikanga on one side mirrored by policy on the other? How can we, like, what does support look like in that as an example to make it less of a mirror and more of a connection.
Marriage.
Yeah.
Quit the mirror,
Yeah.
bring in the marriage.
Nice.
Yeah, because it's
Nice,
it
yeah.
kind of, I mean, I can recognise it too in society at the moment that there's the Western world trying to integrate with te ao Māori, but it does, in my experience and from what I've seen, it is a lot of, oh, well, if they do that, then we can do this. Less of a, how can we do this together?
It really is a big question.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm going to give it a go. Equity has to be achieved. Yeah. Like, you know, te ao Māori, let's go back to the DNA strands just for fun's sake.
Let's go science.
You know, so you've got the two strands, and they haven't quite interwoven yet. But each of those strands are equally as important as the other, and we're not even there yet. You know, it's not even an equitable situation for life to kind of to build on yet. You know, te ao Māori is not resourced and funded and even ideologically seen. You know, we're still trying to tackle stereotypes of savagery. Have we seen that? Have we seen that? You know, the Twitter, I think, or the tweet that went out about our new foreign minister.
Oh, I feel like we need to talk to that just a bit. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Just the same. I think it's in the same lane as that we haven't even reached that place where we can see the value of this. Of people don't want that fusion to happen, you know. And for whatever reason, I'm not insinuating hate, you know, but for whatever reason, you know, because often actually what we operate from is a sense of good. You know, and everybody feels like they're doing the right and good thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm being a Māori, I'm driving this thing, but other people feel like they're doing the right and good thing in totally other spheres. And that's
Army, Navy, you name it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it needs to be. I mean, these words are not my favourite, but equity needs to be achieved before we can even kind of fuse these things together. Before these two worlds can collide in a meaningful and life-forging way. Often we talk about, you know, we jump ahead even sometimes, and we talk about how New Zealand's a multicultural place, but we haven't even been able to properly define and reach duality yet. And once those two po are able to stand together beside each other at their full capacity, well, then we might finally be able to see how they can come together.
You're so right. And at the same time, like, I think you hit it on the nail when you said that's a massive mountain. Like, that's a massive maunga to tackle, especially when everyone thinks they're doing the good by good's sake. Like, and in my head, I'm like, from your perspective, you know, from your lens, you're doing great. From every other lens, you're doing damage. And I think in our relationality to land, to nature, to each other, we're at that. We're like, that's a direct reflection. Like, I'm trying to support you from my lens.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I'm trying to love you from my lens,
yeah.
And I'm going to try and understand or listen to you from my lens. And it's like,
and offer solutions to your perspective from my lens.
Totally. Yeah.
So fuck you to that.
And that's why I keep playing with this idea of the two DNA strands, because, you know, life and life, you know, that's the level of kinship and understanding that I feel that I want to bring into the world with my poetic articulations and way of being and way of seeing the world, is that we're all kin, like, to the max. And without each other, you know, there is no life here. Like, life. Without each other, there's no life here. That's where we're at, you know?
I totally receive that. And I totally, like, no one's telling me this, but I believe that. Like, I believe what you're saying, because it's just, there's nothing, like, I could plug in the scriptures from the Bible if you want, or I could plug in the academic journals, but when you feel something, like, I'm like, I guess that's where for me in my master's journey, it's been hard to try and figure out how I collaborate with people of other perspectives or other lived experiences, because their perspective on the kaupapa or on the topic, I'm like, yeah, that comes from a certain place, status, and that comes from a specific tone.
Totally.
And in my head, I'm like, how do I collaborate with people who don't think like me, but at the same time not lose the essence of what I think like, or what my people think like? Because it's not like I'm the collective intelligence of my people.
Totally.
So I don't understand. I guess trying to build that bridge, or trying to build multiple bridges around that, because I'm like, it's not as much as I'd love for it to be a blame game, and I'm like F you to all the Westerners and all of this thing, that's low hanging fruit for me. I'm like, the high fruits, the fruits that are actually hard to get, is that collaboration on all levels of actually just sharing ideas and ideals. I'm like, intelligence in the brain is a supercomputer, which means that I could speak 5 languages if I wanted to. If I train myself, if I went into there, and I can do it, or otherwise if I dive deep into myself, those tongues might come out naturally, and I haven't listened enough for that. But yeah, it's been such I guess to me, I'm really projecting that it's been hard to try and find an equilibrium of how to embed indigeneity and indigenous thoughts and Mātauranga Māori, because I love the worldview, and I think I've been placed here for a specific reason, because I think in a way there is a connection between these lands and the whakapapa of these the people of Aotearoa and my people, in the lineal perspective. So in the lineal perspective of whakapapa, I don't know why, but I just know it is, because there's I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but there is a massive connection, and there is
totally
there's a massive connection there. Yeah, and I feel like I can't wait to listen to that, because I think I'm still trying to see it and be like, show me, when I need to actually listen to it, which is the perfect message that I'm receiving from you today, actually.
I think one great practice is to dive into those challenging spaces.
Man, have you not challenged me enough today? No, carry on.
Challenge is a garden of growth.
Oh, nice.
Can you just say that one more time for the people in the back?
Challenge. Challenge.
In your best TV voiceover.
Yeah, challenge is a garden of growth, if not the best garden of growth, in my experience. So often I'll just test the waters, and look for challenging conversations and spaces for growth.
See, I told you, I'm wanting to speak science. He speaks science, and then he's telling me to also jump into science. I know, because that was my limiting belief, because science, obviously science wasn't taught to us from an indigenous lens. So I didn't think that indigenous science existed, or a science practice or discipline within indigeneity existed, because it was presented to us very whitewashed. So I purely thought for so long that science was not my language. But the more that I look into the way that I process my thoughts, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm low-key scientific with it. I'm looking for the facts, the recipe, the methodology, all of those things. And yeah, that is one aspect from my condition, my formal education. Sure. But at the same time, in my head, I'm like, actually, I had that way before I started. I've been curious and asked, at all our chiefly meetings, I'm right there with my grandpa and my grandma, asking all the questions that I'm not supposed to be asking, a little kid saying, oh, but why did you guys cheat with each other? And I'm just sitting there this is a full-on community dispute. And I'm like, but why did you sleep with the next door neighbor's wife?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I think my grandparents knew that it was purposeful why I was there.
Totally.
I didn't, no.
Yeah. But now looking back.
Juice.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so give us So some topics that you think are in the far queue that need to be brought up to the front line so that we can actually talk about them and actually start addressing them on a real level.
Yeah, well, that conversation about really making practical those conversations about equity. And I don't know if I'm the best guy for that. I kind of take it more poetic and philosophical. That's my kind of position in it. But I use that as in a practical way to inform as well. And then, you know, and we've been kind of talking in and around it today around kōrero. Who am I? The internal reflection is necessary, Socrates. You know, what is life without the internal examination?
Yes.
So I think, you know, and again, you know, in Te Ao Māori, and I'll leave this as a seed, I suppose. But kōrero, not as a question, but as in taking ownership of that is what you are.
Stop. I'm not ready. One more time.
So kōrero, kōai koe, you know, is often presented as a question. Who are you? Who am I? But take the question mark away. The statement is, I am water. Kōrero. Connectedness, you know, the totality in that, I'm a body of water. Uncle Bruce was on, you know, when he talked about, you know, put water in a teacup, you become the teacup. I think, you know, as a question to explore, I mean, endless value in exploring who we are.
Yeah.
And again, it'll teach us about equity as well. You know, when we look at body of water to body of water to body of water, then all of the stereotypes, all of the things that we assign that make us different and separate just emulsifies like a drop of water in the ocean.
Because literally that's that, like, so I keep on telling my students, I'm like, we don't even know that our technology that we use derived from nature.
100%, yeah.
You know, like all the things that we use to communicate and all the things that we use in the now, I'm like, all of this is derived from nature, family. And if we don't know how to relate to nature and uplift nature in that aspect, we're already in debt. We're in overdraft right now. So I don't know if you've dealt with anything around deep ecology or shallow ecology, but that's just like the Western way of teaching us what we already know as Indigenous people. Like, and I think in a way of like, man, relationality is everything. Like,
Totally, yeah.
people, land, water, and I literally had to close my eyes to see what I could hear with my eyes, and I swear I saw waves, like blue wave shocks, going out when you were talking. I'm like, oh,
Nice.
beautiful.
That's synesthesia.
Yeah.
I was chatting with a mate at a birthday party, I think, talking about the concept of the sweet kumara and how in Māori, you know, the kumara doesn't speak of its own sweetness.
Stop.
But he, you know, and again, that's probably another important piece to explore in this space, I imagine. And it's around story. And then he said to me, well, that's because we know the story of the kumara, so we know it's sweet. And then he pointed to some leaves on a tree and he said, perhaps if we knew the story of those leaves, we'd know they were sweet as well. And then he took it a step further and said, yeah, you know, the ants might think those leaves are sweet. And it just brings, you know. And then he said, you know, and then he got even funnier and he said, you're the man. And then I realized that what he was saying is, know your story, know how sweet you are. And I said, well, so are you. I said, you're the man too. And he's like, yeah, that's it. That's it. And then one more little conversation we were having in that moment, talking about the ecology, the ecosystem beneath a rock. And I said, man, in Te Ao Marama, the world that we live in today, we can't even lift up a rock without knowing everything that's underneath that rock. There's no rock unturned, there's no stone left unturned where we don't know the entire ecosystem living beneath that rock. We know the bugs, we know the plants, we know the dirt, we know the et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, what rock?
Oh, mind blowing.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, man, what did you just say? But I got it in the moment, Yeah, what rock?
Boom.
This is where we're at, We talk about science, this is where we're at. This is how much we know. And this is how much our tipuna knew. This is...
But without the formal education, without all of those things, right?
Yeah. They listen to the songs of the rock. They listen to the stories of the trees, And
I'm just done because I'm literally so done with you right now. No, because I don't know why, but like I've been telling Kelsey, I'm like, I literally started diving into plant consciousness.
Nice.
And just because I fell on it, I fell on the right person at the right time. And Monica Gagliano, she like scienced the hell out of like communication with plants, and she says that it like they speak through sound vibrations and it's music. So every plant has its hidden song, and like her whakaaro around it is like, thus I spoke to the plant, or thus the plant spoke to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then hearing you talk about your analogy I'm like, what?
Imagine if we could vibe, at the frequency of those plants.
Done.
And it seems so achievable when we think about the world the way Tesla told us to, in terms of frequency and vibration.
But he was way, and he's still a way too ahead of his game. Like no one wants to
alien, that guy.
Well, it would change the whole way we approach electricity.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Free energy. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Just humming out of the ground.
But no, we need to monetize it and monopolize it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
No, all right. So, any projects you're coming into or doing in the next half of this year? Because I know that I'm actually gonna try and subscribe to your creative hour or your creative. You tell us more about this.
So yeah, my workmates are doing a thing called Creatively Wired.
Yeah.
Where they bring in creatives to have very similar conversations like this, but through the lens of the arts and creativity, and just kind of having a insightful look into how the creative mind works of different local creatives in the region. And then
I'm so subscribed to that.
Yeah, and we'll link it down below too. Yes. So if you want to check it out, you can.
We need more of this, like other avenues of explaining reality as opposed to just social media.
And I think if we separate arts and creativity, I think one of the ways that we're leaning towards this, I suppose, in the realm of creativity is using the arts as a platform to enhance creative things that don't even exist yet. Because we can't assign them to the arts because they don't exist yet. But there's so many creative ways of thinking and being and technological advancement that are being thought about and conceptualized in people's minds that is arts and creativity that hasn't been unearthed yet.
Thank you for coming through. We do really appreciate you coming and sharing your experiences.
Awesome, yeah. Really enjoyed where that went.
Yeah. And if people want to connect with you, like, you want to plug in your socials?
Yeah, I suppose as an artist, I only really have my Instagram page called Wizard of Megos. Yes. My original handle was Megos27, and so my artist page is the Wizards of that guy. The words of that guy.
Wow.
But also, obviously, a play on Wizard of Oz, which is a timeless movie of
Oh yeah, plug in your top 3 movies then.
In recent times, Interstellar, because a lot of people saw it in different ways, but I saw it as this powerful bond between a father and a daughter, and being that I'm a father to 2 daughters, not even space and time could keep them apart. So yeah, Interstellar's one. What have I watched recently? Yeah, I suppose, well, you know, when The Matrix did happen in the first instance, that was a big movie for me. And then there was a thriller called Old Boy, a Korean thriller called Old Boy that just was a total mind bend and break and smash and crumble that I watched many years ago, and I think Spike Lee did a American remake that doesn't quite hit the mark, but the original Korean movie was exceptional.
I feel like we're all asleep on Korean movies. Like,
Yeah,
they go in deep. Like they go in deep.
yeah,
And so every time I watch foreign movies, and because I'm reading it, my sensory experience of that movie completely different. And I'm like, I have to pause and go back, because I'm like, no, I missed the message.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
I've missed the whole message. And even though I've already seen it twice or three times, I'm like, nah, I need to watch it again.
Yeah, they're so blatantly metaphorical. You know, in Parasite, when he's like looking at the painting, he's like, it's so metaphorical. Like just rubbing it in your face that this is a totally different brand of movie.
Just because they can as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, if you get it, you get it. If you don't,
Yeah.
the ship is sailed.
Yeah, like that scene I feel was purpose built for Western audience, to be like, look at this movie again, you know, look at everything that's happening here, and you'll start to see how metaphorical every kind of colour and scene is. I'm big on the Korean movies. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. All right, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, everybody, and have a great day wherever you're listening from.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.